When we talk UConn women's basketball, one name comes to mind: Paige.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, just want to ask for a quick favor. If you're enjoying the content, please take a second to subscribe and follow the audio versions wherever you listen. It really helps the show grow, and I truly appreciate all of your support. Every follow, subscription, download, like, share, it helps create more revenue for UConn NIL. Yes, Locked On UConn is donating 10% of all revenue to Bleeding Blue for Good. So by supporting this show, you are directly supporting the UConn athletic program's efforts in the NIL world. Thank you for being a part of this Locked On UConn community. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet before and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, as I mentioned, the one name that comes to mind when we're talking about the UConn women in its current form is Paige. It's not a return, kind of is, because she could have went pro. So the return of Paige Bueckers is kind of front page news, to use an older term, in the women's basketball lexicon. So we're diving deep into what this means. And isn't just about her, but she is the face of our program currently. She is likely the face of college basketball, and she's the face of a new era at UConn, a program that's been the gold standard in women's college basketball for decades. She's coming off a year where she failed on the national stage, but did so valiantly, and she's back with a healthy offseason and ready to make her mark. So let's take a step back and look at her journey at UConn. In her freshman season, Paige completely came in and rocked, the college basketball world. She played all 39 games, leading the team with an average of 20 points per game, also dishing out 5 assists each night. That season, Paige won just about every major award: the Wooden Award, the Naismith Trophy, the AP Player of the Year as a freshman, becoming the first freshman to achieve that sweep. That was the signal that we were witnessing a special player. And a lot of people thought this is going to be someone that is going to challenge, Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, Sue Bird, those legends in UConn basketball lexicon. But it hasn't been an easy journey. And I think for most UConn fans, that's probably the toughest pill to swallow with Paige. They love her. She's fantastic. I love Paige. I think she's one of the best basketball players I've ever seen. But, if you go into her sophomore season, there's a mix of brilliance and hardship because she put up solid numbers. She missed 19 games due to a knee injury. And just when it seemed like she was back, Paige tore her ACL in August of 2022, forcing her to miss the entire junior year. So now she's back obviously last year was a good year. She started all 39 games, leading the team with 21.9 points per game in a team high 53 blocks. Think about that. That's crazy. She's second in rebounding with 5.2 points per game. She also racked up 150 assists and 86 steals. In other words, Paige didn't just come back. She came back and dominated. She scored in double digits in 38 of 39 games, put up 20 or more in 27 of those contests. She was a force on both ends of the court, recording 4 double-doubles, all in the postseason. Paige was everywhere, whether she was dropping 32 points and grabbing 10 rebounds against Syracuse or posting 28 and 11 and 7 assists in an Elite 8 against Juju Watkins and USC, who we'll talk about later. For UConn fans, this isn't just about one player. It's about the continuation of a legacy that this program has set the bar very high for excellence. And Paige has a chance to carry that torch for UConn this year. UConn hasn't won a national championship since 2016, a drought that we chronicled pretty recently. And also, again, saying the word drought and UConn women not winning championships. It's a weird combination because they are the modern day dynasty of college basketball. And I think in order for Paige to cement that legacy, she's got to be a part of a championship team. And this season is about more than stats and accolades. It's about bringing UConn back to the mountaintop and back to the national stage where it belongs. I'm going to pause for a second here. Sorry, we're back. Before we move on, I want to tell you about AmeriCares. It's a Connecticut-based nonprofit that I've partnered with to give my listeners an option they trust in giving donations to those affected by Hurricane Helene and eventually Hurricane Milton. I'm going to put a graphic up. It's going to cover my face, but I don't care. So if you're watching on YouTube, check out AmeriCare, right there. But I'm going to talk about this. The storm left a trail of destruction, destroying homes and businesses, flooding communities, and leaving survivors without power or running water. Connecticut-based AmeriCares is on the ground in the hardest hit communities, including Western North Carolina, restoring access to health services, delivering medicine, water, and relief supplies, and helping to keep health clinics open. There's a long recovery ahead. AmeriCares will be there to support those in need. Let's do what we can, my listeners, those who support the podcast, to support hurricane survivors. Together, we can improve health in the time of crisis, because that's what this organization is about. To learn more about AmeriCare's hurricane relief efforts or donate, go to americares.org. When we return, really appreciate you guys. I'm going to take this off the screen. So check out AmeriCares if you guys can. If you have the money, donate it. I'm sure they have other means of donations if you need it. When we return, I'll talk about Paige's impact on college basketball as a whole. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com to get started. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, taking you through a little bit about Paige Bueckers here and the UConn women. When we talk about the explosion of women's college basketball on the national stage, it's impossible to ignore Caitlin Clark. But UConn fans, I can feel the cringe. So hold on and listen. Before the likes of Caitlin, there was Paige Bueckers. And I can even feel the cringe there. And before Paige, there was UConn women's basketball. Not a player, a program. A program that has not just participated in the evolution of the sport, but has defined it. The foundation for today's success was laid long ago, even before Gina Auriemma and Chris Daly. But when UConn first stepped into the national spotlight, it began to shape the very landscape of women's college basketball as we know it today. We were well ahead of our time in the state of Connecticut. It's a program that built its legacy on a series of triumphs and iconic players. And to understand Paige Bueckers' impact today, you have to look back at the dynastic legacy she's inherited. The UConn women's basketball story truly took off with Rebecca Lobo. In 1991, UConn made a surprise run to the Final Four, which set the stage for their transformation into a powerhouse. That success allowed them to land Rebecca Lobo, a high school All-American who became the cornerstone of the team. By 1994, alongside teammates like Jennifer Rosati, Jamel Elliott, Kara Walters, Lobo led the Huskies to their first 30-win season and led a 13-year-old me who wanted to be a part of that, was excited and yelling and screaming in my Meriden, Connecticut childhood home. But it was the following year in 1995 that they cemented their status as national force by going undefeated. They won the national championship with a perfect 35-0 record, a feat that captured the imagination of fans nationwide. That season also saw the birth of one of college sports' best rivalries, as UConn defeated Tennessee in a thrilling Martin Luther King Day showdown at a sold-out Gamble Pavilion, signaling their arrival as a true new powerhouse in the women's game. The legacy continued to grow, fueled by stars like Sue Bird, Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, each whom led UConn to championships and took the program to new heights. In 2002, with Taurasi at the helm, UConn completed another undefeated season, dominating opponents and securing their place as a dynasty. The team continued to set records, and by 2010, under the leadership of Maya Moore, they had amassed back-to-back undefeated seasons with a historic 78-game winning streak. It's amazing to think. This success wasn't just about wins. It was about redefining what women's college basketball could be. With every championship, every All-American, UConn's influence grew. They didn't just win games, they drew national attention, landed TV deals, created a brand that resonated across the country. UConn was honored by President Obama, celebrated with parades, multiple presidents, not just Obama, but that's the one that comes to mind. And it is seen as a symbol of excellence in women's sports as a whole. They set attendance records, sold out arenas, turned what was once a niche following into a nationwide fan base. And as we see, because we talk about Blanca Quinones and Gandhi Malu Mamel, we'll be talking about them tomorrow, a international fan base worldwide. Today, Paige Becker stands on the shoulders of that legacy. She carries the torch of a program that has become a beacon of women's basketball with 11 titles and a reputation for excellence that is unmatched. Paige isn't just stepping into her own spotlight. She's stepping into one that's been built over decades by players who made UConn the gold standard. And while media, podcasts, talking heads will inevitably focus on individual stars, it's just the way of the game. The reality is that at UConn, it's always been about something bigger. It's about how you and your teammates come together, face adversity, fight to go out as a champion. A story UConn has told time and time again. Paige knows that, and she knows that being a part of this program means upholding that tradition and that standard. In the end, it's not just about one player. It's about how this team, led by Paige Beckers, will step up to meet the moment. And let's face it, UConn fans, got to have a little bit of luck. Through the years, were there injuries? Sure. But not injuries like we've seen lately. And so for Paige to go through an entire offseason feeling good, feeling healthy, with the eventual return of AZ Fudd, to the infusion of transfers with Caitlin Chen and top talent like Sarah Strong. It's another chapter in a story that's being written right now. And that's a story that continues to shape the future of women's basketball. Because let's face it, with UConn, it's not just about this season, even though we're in the moment. It's about building on this legacy year after year after year. And with what I've seen, the future is bright with some of the commits that we have, freshmen that are coming in, potential recruits that are mulling whether they want to make UConn their home next season, because this season is going to be an interesting one. Coming up, the future, what it holds. Can I predict it? Maybe. Let's find out. And let's talk about the road ahead. You're Locked On UConn. All right, guys, UConn may be on a bye week this week for football, but now's the perfect time to secure your tickets for next Saturday's October 19th, 12 noon game as the Huskies take on the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. It's a nationally televised showdown. Kickoff is at noon with all the excitement around campus. This one game you don't want to miss. Plus, the school will be doing some special giveaways, so tickets might be tougher to get than you think. So why am I bringing that up? Here's the deal. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for game time at checkout to get $20 off your first purchase. Don't wait. Get those tickets now and be a part of the action as UConn takes on Wake Forest. Promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Get in the game. Let's show our Huskies some love. Check it out. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. Last segment of the day. Let's talk about Paige's future. There's potential opportunity in the road ahead that she has in front of her. So as we look to the future, there's no doubt that Paige Bueckers has her sights set on more than just leading UConn this season. That's the primary focus. So I want to get that straight. So when I go talk about this, I'm not saying that Paige is looking ahead to the WNBA or looking ahead to facing South Carolina or such and such. These are just things that I feel like are in the near term. So she has her sights set on more than just leading UConn, right? She's in a unique position, a player who not only has the potential to bring a championship back to Storrs, which is job number one, but also you have to start understanding that she's going to be in the WNBA draft, and she is going to likely be the number one draft pick. There will be some potential that someone else could be, someone that really kind of steps up. But before she can take that next step, she has some serious competition standing in the way, both in terms of who she'll be playing in the collegiate game, and then also who will be vying for that draft stock, if you will, the draft conversation. First up, I've been saying this, and I think I've been wrong, so I'm going to correct myself. UConn is not the betting favorite to win the national championship on the women's side. They are still pretty good odds, plus 450 to win it, but also South Carolina. They are the reigning defending undefeated champions under Coach Dawn Staley. They're at plus 180, which is ridiculous, which is kind of where UConn used to be in terms of those Brianna Stewart years where it was kind of like inevitable that they were going to win a national championship. It was probably, wasn't betting back then. And in these FanDuel, DraftKings places didn't exist. But if you look on FanDuel right now, it is plus 180 on South Carolina, plus 450 UConn, plus 450 USC, and I think Texas is plus 500. So Dawn Staley's program is the gold standard right now. Let's just call a spade, right? When winning championships is losing and obviously winning a ton of championships. And I absolutely, excuse me, adore Dawn Staley. She is a phenomenal coach. She gets the best out of her players. And to use a basketball term, she's a dog. Like, she's just I would never have wanted to go up against her because she'd pick my pocket so clean in terms of playing basketball. It just wouldn't even be funny. She was a hell of a player. She's an even better coach. So, they've only lost 3 games over the last 3 seasons. They're a powerhouse with depth, athleticism, and a culture of winning that's hard to beat. So South Carolina has been a thorn in UConn's side in terms of kind of almost taking their mantle away in the interim. And I don't think Dawn Staley is going to want to go away quietly. So for Paige, leading her team past the South Carolina juggernaut would be a monumental accomplishment. And it's also something that really hasn't been done since the years of Rebecca Lobo and Jennifer Rosati and that gang kind of slaying the Tennessee Dragon and Pat Summitt. Because, and this is just what it is. The Diana Taurasi years, the Sue Bird years, the Brianna Stewart years, the teams that were Maya Moore, the teams that were dominant, like just nobody could touch them. They were the bullies. And there wasn't that team that they had to overcome. So Paige is doing something that hasn't been done at UConn since its inception of being a national power. So I look forward to that. I think it's also kind of Gino's I wouldn't say his persona has changed over the years because, back in 91 when they made the Final Four run and then obviously breaking through in 95, they were the, plucky underdogs that, turned into this juggernaut. And he's held on to that stranglehold for quite a bit. And I wouldn't say it's slipped away, but it's definitely not in his grasp right now. It's definitely under South Carolina's. And so for UConn to be back on top, he's doing everything he can from a recruiting perspective but this is the team that I think is the head honcho, and I think they're the ones that we're going to have to go through. And then there's Juju Watkins in USC. She is for two reasons, right? She is generally considered, if not the best player in college basketball, the second best to Paige. So they go neck and neck. I think she'll be a top contender for the number one pick. She also, was a 1 seed last year with USC, and they lost to UConn in the Elite Eight. So, whether we're talking draft prospects or who we're going to play in the tournament potentially, Juju Watkins and USC is one of those players to look out for. USC is on the rise. They have a potential to really be a top 3-4 team this year. So for Paige, going up against players like Juju is more than just a game. It's a chance to prove she's the best in college basketball, which when she's healthy, I think she is. I just don't. I know I'm a homer because I'm a UConn person, but I just think the overall game is better than Juju's, and it's close. I probably could be convinced otherwise, but it would have to be a really compelling argument. Then there's Texas, Notre Dame are also teams that can't be overlooked. Texas brings kind of a physical, defensive minded approach that can really wear down opponents. They're not just contenders; they're potentially stumbling blocks on UConn's path to a title. Obviously, these aren't conference opponents; they have to still go through the Big East. But as we know, the Big East is very weak this year. But an old frenemy from the Big East, Notre Dame, that is a team. I think that there's some potential where they are going to be a dark horse. I think they're at like plus 800 to win the title this year. If UConn was to face Notre Dame in the tournament, that would bring back some old memories of them being a Big East foe. And I would obviously hope that they would make them remember what it was like to lose to UConn. So as Paige gears up for what could be her, what will be her final season at UConn, she's got her work cut out for her. This isn't about putting up big numbers. I don't care if she puts up. I think Gino wants her to be more aggressive, so her numbers may go up. But it's not just about that. It's about overcoming some of the toughest competition in women's college basketball ever. And while Paige is likely a top candidate for the number one pick in the WNBA draft, this season is really her chance to cement that position by showing she can lead her team through this gauntlet of elite programs, beating that top tier South Carolina team. So in many ways, this season will define Paige's legacy in a negative way or a positive way. And I don't think it's championship or bust for Paige, but that's kind of been the mentality and the motto of UConn, that it's almost unthinkable to have went to UConn for 4 years and not won a national championship. So she's not just playing for UConn, she's playing for herself. I mean, I hate to say that because it's a team sport, but she's definitely playing for herself. I think everybody does in within that team competition. And she's also playing for her draft stock for a chance to leave college basketball as a champion. So Paige has the opportunity to go out on top. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this. But I think, like I said, to reiterate a point, it's not going to be easy. And if South Carolina is the last team standing along with UConn, that's going to be a really tough road or tough mountain to climb. This season will be remembered for years to come, not just by UConn fans, but I think by all of college basketball, because it's hit an inflection point with women's college basketball that we have these stars like Juju Watkins, like coaching stars like Dawn Staley and Gino, like it used to be when Pat Summitt was alive, God rest her soul. And as Paige kind of steps into this moment, I don't think she's just thinking about the draft or the future. I think she's living in the now, determined to make her mark and bring back a title to UConn. So this is her story. My version of it, definitely not her telling it. And I think her season, potentially her crowning achievement, could be holding up that trophy with Gino smiling behind her. And this is just the beginning. We're less than 30 days away. I think we're 28 days away from the college basketball season starting. So as Paige Bueckers embarks on taking on the best of the best, I can't wait for what the final chapter is. And I have to say that for me, if she doesn't win a national championship, her time at UConn is not a failure. It's a fantastic journey of what could have been, and also a little bit of tragedy in the very basketball sense, not the tragedy that we're witnessing, on the grounds in North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, these places that got hit, and eventually Florida with Milton. It's just a travesty because Paige was blessed with these gifts. She's worked really hard for what she's done. And sometimes you don't always get rewarded with the shiny object at the end. You just get a great job and get them next time. But I really hope that's not the case this year. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked on, stay connected, and to remember, it's not just about getting it done. It's about doing it in a way it can't be done any better. That's our goal every day. That's our goal here at Locked On. So, go Huskies. Go Paige.